Okay, hello everyone. This is the second webinar of the Scopus webinar series, and we're just going to give it a couple minutes to allow everyone to arrive. So we'll start at 11:02.
Good morning, everyone. While waiting for it to start, hope everyone is doing well during this time.
Guess like everyone else, most people are at home, right? All right, let's get started. Okay, welcome everyone. My name's Alexander van Servelle and I work for Elsevier. I'm joined by Derek. You want to say hi, Derek?
Hi, everyone. I'm Derek, based in Singapore.
Yeah, so we're both based in Singapore. We're both at home. We're hoping that everyone who's attending is well and healthy. And the topic for today is about Scopus, specifically what content is in Scopus and how has it been selected. Derek and I often talk about this topic, but sometimes we talk, half day, full day. Today, we're covering it in just about 45 minutes. So it's quite high level. It is part of a webinar series, which we've planned 2 weeks ago was the first one, which was very basic about search results, how to search and find results in Scopus. And we have a lot of other topics. So every 2 weeks, we will be presenting on Scopus in these webinars. Each webinar is also recorded and the recordings are disseminated to all the people who've attended. So if you're interested in any of these topics, please feel free to sign up and come to those webinars as well. Today we already, introduced ourselves, but I'm the senior consultant for research intelligence for Southeast Asia based in Singapore. Derek, you want to explain a little bit what you do?
Sure. Hi, I'm marketing development for Southeast Asia. And basically, Sandra and I work together to help bring you things like this, things that are relevant and timely.
Okay, so again, we're recording these sessions and you can use the Q&A function to ask questions. We'll try to leave 15 or 20 minutes at the end of the session, which we'll go through and try to answer those questions. We've set up a couple polls to try and understand who's coming here and how well you know Scopus. So I'm going to launch the first poll because we'd really like to know who you are. So just use if you can answer the poll and indicate what role describes you best, then it'll help us to kind of focus a bit more on the angles that are relevant to you. So we see that there's a lot of students and researchers. I'll leave the poll open for another 30 seconds. Oops, I keep switching. Okay, so here we look at the poll and we see that there are a lot of students and researchers that are here. That's fantastic. Welcome. Scopus is great for doing research. Librarians, we know you well. Greetings, but it's also good to see there are 6 journal editors here. So typically when we talk about how content is selected into Scopus, we get a lot of questions about, from journals who want to be indexed, exactly how that works. But I think it's also relevant for other people, librarians, researchers themselves to understand that the content in Scopus is selected. It's not like Google, for example, that would have everything. and we'll try to run you through how that process works. So let me remove the poll and go to the next slide. But before we go into that, we wanted to alert you to the fact that Elsevier has been looking at how we can help the COVID-19 pandemic, and we've created a lot of online resources. We've even giving free access to our products and data to individuals and organizations that specifically working on vaccines. So if you're interested in reading about what resources we have available, please feel free to come to the resource hub, which is available via this link here on the slides, which we'll share with you after the webinar. We've also launched a COVID-19 Pure portal. So this is a portal which allows you to search and find all of the researchers and research organizations, departments, and people that are active in research topics related to COVID-19. So that's good. You can find the papers, but you could also find the people. So this helps to link people together for collaboration. So we welcome you, those of you for that, whom that's relevant, to have a look at that. But as for the topic of today, the content that's in Scopus, so Scopus, for those of you, so there's a lot of students and researchers. If you're not sure what Scopus is, it's actually a citation database. So it's a source neutral abstract and citation database. All of the content is selected, evaluated by an independent content selection advisory board. Some of the good things about Scopus is that it's a simple data model. So gives access to over 78 million papers from 23,000 journals. Everyone who has access to Scopus has access to the same database. So there's no different configurations or add-ons. We've been working hard to expand the coverage of local journals. So for example, we've added many local journals from publishers and universities in Asia, and specifically Southeast Asia, but also in other parts of Asia. So we look to and have expanded the local content that's in Scopus. Scopus has great quality author profiles and affiliation profiles, so you can search not just for content, but understand people and understand organizations. Scopus is the data source for the university rankings and other types of evaluation processes. And every journal that's indexed in Scopus has 3 journal metrics that help you to understand the relative quality of the journal. If you look at the content that is indexed in Scopus, about 40% of it comes from the big publishers. So Elsevier is the biggest publisher. About 11% of the journals in Scopus are Elsevier. But you see that 60% of the journals come from smaller publishers, not the big ones. It could be university press. It could be actually any publisher, any journal which is producing high quality science is welcome in Scopus, but it needs to make it through the quality control process. Looking
Sander,
at... Yep.
Hi Sander, sorry to disturb
Hey.
you, but there's a request for you to please speak up. So
Speak up. All right, same as last week. Let me see if I can turn it a bit louder. Give me a minute. All right, I hope I'm not yelling. So Scopus covers journals that are in 40 different languages from 105 different countries. It's updated every day. By now, there's almost 9 million open access documents you can link through to from Scopus. Covers journals, conferences, and books. Now I get the white screen, sorry. Looking at the total database at the time that this analysis was done was about 76 million items. 72 million of those were in peer-reviewed journals. where 32% was in health sciences, 34 in physical sciences, 12% social sciences, 22% in life sciences. About 10 million items were in conference proceedings, where you can see conferences are heavily tilted towards physical sciences. 83% of the content that's in conferences is physical sciences. You see a little bit less than 2 million items in books and book series, which is heavily tilted towards social sciences. 45% of the content that's in books is social sciences. But overall, it provides quite a good coverage of all the different disciplines that one could want to read or analyze. All of that content, so content has been selected over the years. Scopus started in 2004. And there are many journals which submit actively, they submit their journal to Scopus via an online form. And that form, there's a team behind that will collect information about the journal. And the end responsibility of choosing if the journal gets accepted or not is with the people that are on this photograph, who are the Content Selection Advisory Board. They're an independent board. Most of them don't. The subject chairs themselves don't work for Elsevier, so we really can't tell them what to do, which means there's no conflict of interest, there's no commercial considerations. They're really just looking at the quality of the journal. Each one is specialized in a particular field and is the chair for that field, and they own the final decision. So pardon my white screen. I'm going to we at Elsevier have been supporting local journals by setting up some local Scopus boards. So the Content Selection Advisory Board is a global board. They meet twice a year, and the people are from all over the world. But we also have a local board. We had one in Thailand, which is now going to cover all of Southeast Asia. There's a Chinese local board, Korean local board, and Russian local board. These boards allow closer kind of engagement with people within those countries to help select the content there. Also, Derek and I have been giving putting a lot of work into professionalizing editor workshops to provide in-depth kind of education and working with editors and citation indexes and government agencies to help everyone understand how to get the journals ready to be indexed in Scopus. And Elsevier now also has a tool called Digital Commons, which is a professional platform that can help journals if they want to take the next step in terms of having the most sophisticated platform to do the peer review and hosting of their journal content. This is some shameless self-promotion. This is me and Derek and Professor Zoraida. I guess it's a year ago in June last year, we gave a big editor workshop co-organized with the Ministry of Education in Malaysia, attended by 80 or 90 journal editors. I think that this is always a good thing to do, and it can take a day to cover the content in a lot of detail. So our challenge today is to just explain to you kind of high level, how does the content get into Scopus, and why is that a good thing? If we look at Southeast Asia, at to the biggest research producers, we see that Indonesia has shot forward in terms of the number of papers per year, having surpassed Thailand, Singapore, and Malaysia just in the last few years. That is when you consider all content types, so that's articles, conference proceedings, reviews, books. And if you look only at articles and reviews, we see that actually Malaysia is still at the top spot, but even there, Indonesia is growing very quickly. So let's look a bit closer at the actual Scopus content selection criteria, and that's for you, Derek.
Right. Thank you. Thanks, Santa. So what journals exactly are the CSA be looking for when they want to include this in Scopus? So there are a set of requirements and it's designed to reflect the best practices. And this is basically based on scholarly publishing. And what are they? Essentially, if you look at the points there, they are high quality and original content. It needs to be well edited and with longevity. It needs to be focused upon their roots and subject areas. It needs to make significant, measurable, and valued contribution to its target audience and field. Wider international relevance, but also valuable locally, yeah? As well as honest, ethical, and focused on high quality and standards. Now, you may think this is just a set of broad requirements, but can you go to the next slide, Sander? But if you look at it, right, think of Scopus. Getting into Scopus is a bit more difficult than that. So think of it as a filter. So this is called the stage 1 of the filter. All the titles, the journal titles that are submitted for consideration, they must meet all of these technical criteria in order to be considered for the review. So they must be peer reviewed. They must have English abstracts. It needs to be a regular publication. It needs to have Roman script references, as well as the publication ethics statement. Now, if you're saying, what are all these? You know, how can I get more information? If you look down at the bottom here, you will see a set of content, policy, and selection criteria. So when you click on that, it will give you a detailed description of each and every one of these points, okay? This is just the first layer, what we call like stage 1 of the filter. So if you do not meet any of these criteria, it doesn't even move on to the next stage of the criteria. So next slide, please. So I'm going to take one column and Sander is going to take the other column. Yeah. So this is considered the stage 2 of the Scopus selection criteria. And bear in mind, it has to be serial content, which means that it cannot be a one-off item. Okay, it needs to be serial, a series of stuff. So for the journal policy itself, it needs to have convincing editorial concept or a policy. It needs to be peer reviewed. The type of peer review, is it single blind, double blind? Diversity in terms of geographic distribution of the editors and diversity in geographic distribution of the authors. Sander?
Yeah, so before I go into the criteria, I think it's fair to note for people who this is new, that Scopus is a curated data set where we're very careful to maintain the quality of all of the journals and articles that are included, right? And that's one of the benefits of, and I get that question quite often as well, how come when I go to Google, I get more results than if I look in Scopus, and maybe I should use Google instead? And it's like, well, fair enough. There's more content in Google, but there's no content selection in Google, which means it includes predatory journals, and it could, include things that look like genuine science, but aren't really, which is, I think, in our field, a dangerous thing if you're going to make decisions or base future research projects on results that aren't authentic. So these criteria are designed for the independent board to select the journals and to be vetted on a set of criteria which are transparent. So it's like you can see exactly what the criteria are. Like Derek said, the journal policy is incredibly important. And it's that vision and scope that a journal articulates, like this is what our journal is. This is why our journal is about what it is. And pretty much everything else is evaluated in context of that policy and aim. So in terms of the quality, they're going to look at judge what the academic contribution of that journal is to the field. They're going to look at the abstracts and see that they're properly written. So abstracts should, for example, not just be an introduction. There should be introduction, methods, results, and conclusion. Abstracts need to be in English, which means if the journal was originally not in English, they need to be translated properly. Google Translate definitely cannot. Quality and conformity with the states and aims. So again, they're going to look at what did you say the the aims and scope of the journal are, and then judge whether the content is been selected in line with that. So sometimes we'll see journals that say, well, we're very specifically about marine biology, but then if you look in the journal, you find papers that are about completely different subject areas, and something doesn't seem to be working in the management of that journal to select papers which are in line with the scope. Derek, you want to do?
Yeah. And then the third column, you can see under journal standing, we look at 2 points: the citedness of journal articles in Scopus, as in like how current is it? For example, right now, the buzzword is coronavirus. So if you key in coronavirus in there, you get a whole host of stuff. Everybody, that's trending, right? But maybe if you are talking about some obscure subject matter, then the citedness level will be much lower, yeah? Then second point will be the editor standing. All these things will be elaborated when we do our detailed journal editors workshop. So this is like, bear in mind, it's just a very high level overview, yeah? Next point, Sandra.
Yeah, so regularity is important. The journals need to publish regularly. And again, so if they state that they publish twice a year, then the publication schedule consistently needs to be twice a year. So it can't be twice and then once and then 3 times. If they were twice a year and they've gone up to 4 times a year, they need to then maintain 4 times a year and not go back to 2 times a year. That regularity is just important for serial content.
So for the next column is the online availability. So first point is content available online. Is it available online? What do people do when they're posed with a question and they don't understand the question or they are not sure of how to get information? First and foremost, they will try to go online to find out. And more often than not, they go to Google, all right? So they go to Google and check, what is this subject matter all about? So if your journal is not available online or your content is not available online, question is, how do people search for you? So first point, content availability online. Second, English language journal homepage. Now, not everybody speaks and understands English, right? So but by and large, the scientific community looks at English as the lingua franca, right? The language that most people will understand. So if it's not in English language, it's going to be very difficult for others who may not be from the same ethnic group to understand that particular language. The quality of homepage. Now, some people have looked at the journal homepage and said, look, it looks more like a supermarket advertisement than a proper academic, scholarly academic journal. So these are the 3 main points under online availability. Yeah. Next. So finally, the decision whether or not the CSAB accepts or rejects depends on all those factors. They look at stage 1, they look at stage 2, and then they finally say, okay, fine, we'll accept this journal, and then it will be covered in Scopus from year of the selection moving forward. But if they reject the journal, they will give the journal a suggestion of what that journal needs to do in order to get accepted. And they'll have an embargo period anywhere from several months to up to 5 years, okay, to actually correct and amend and review, and finally resubmit the journal. Then they'll decide whether to accept or reject the journal again. Yeah. Next slide. Now, this is just a snapshot of the top 30 countries with the most titles reviewed. The point here, if you look at the orange bar, it's the number of titles that have been accepted, and the gray bar, the number of titles that have been rejected. So if you look at on the left-hand side, an example, yeah. So on the left-hand side, you can see the United States. So they submitted like over 1,000 journals, but they got about 60% acceptance rate. Now, the world average, okay, is 48%. Right on top there, you see 48% accepted. Right? There were over 13,000 titles that were submitted between the years 2011 to 2019. Right? The whole idea being that Scopus does not simply accept any journal. There's a strict criteria that we adhere to, and we look at the different stages, the different filters that I showed you earlier for the Scopus journal selection criteria. And then these are the acceptance rejection rate, right? So just because a journal right, or country submits a lot of journals, does not mean that its chances are higher. They all need to adhere to the strict criteria. All right, next please. So this is basically for journal editors. Now, before they submit any journals, this is something that Scopus has created for them so that they can do their own self-evaluation, okay? What we call the self-pre-evaluation tool. So before they decide that they want to submit, a lot of people are very excited and say, okay, I'm ready to submit my journal. And then when they submit, they get rejected and they're asked to come back 2 years later, 3 years later, and they get very demoralized. So in order to help them, right, by going through all the various criteria, there's also this tool. Just go to www.readyforscopus.com and you can see this pre-evaluation tool. And if you look at all the various criteria here and you follow them, it corresponds to the top right-hand corner there. You can see the number, the percentage that this, I can't really see, sorry, let me just take out my spectacles. Okay, so, okay, so for example here, in this slide, you can see that after going through all the various criteria, it says there's 63% readiness. So they have to decide for themselves, am I ready? Am I not ready? So if you look at the green portion, those are the things that they've actually met all these various criteria. And if you look at the gray or other colored portions, you can see that perhaps, you know, based on the comments that's in the box there, perhaps they need to improve on those before they can consider submitting. All right, next please. So this basically gives you a workflow, right? So for example, when a journal is submit their titles, there's a confirmation and tracking number that's being given to them. And from this itself, they will have to check, internally, we'll check against the minimum criteria, whether they meet the basic tier 1. Basically, remember we talked about the stage 1. So did they meet all those basic filtering criteria? Next, they look at the enrichment of the required information. All these things are done internally, behind the scenes. We'll enrich the stuff. We input from any external reviewers based on that. And then it's passed on to the Content Selection and Advisory Board for your evaluation. The evaluation is done by the chair, the subject chair of the respective subject disciplines. And then they will decide, okay, whether it's accepted or it's rejected. And then they'll respond to that journal. Okay, and then finally, you can see that the journal is either accepted. If it's accepted, then they'll be told when it will be indexed in Scopus, or when if it's rejected, to come back again in several months to up to 5 years. Okay, that's the entire workflow. Next slide, please. Yeah. So, and Sandra, back to you.
So I'm going to talk about re-evaluation, and if you're wondering what that is, it's based on the fact that over time, the quality of a journal can change, right? So we've, over the years, accepted thousands of journals into Scopus. And sometimes those journals, once they get into Scopus, they benefit from the visibility and they start to really flower and flourish and do much better. And some of them don't. So some of them don't do well. Some of them have changes in management. Some of them, the quality is low, decreases. And in some of them, they might even adopt predatory practices. So that's a problem. So it's a problem for all of us in science if there's predatory journals. And we definitely want to remove any journals from Scopus that don't meet the mark anymore. Predatory publishing is actually a concept that is not easy to define. Like, there are disagreements about it. If you ask 5 experts to look at the same journal, they don't always agree about whether a particular journal is predatory or not. So we have any journal which we have doubts about goes into a reevaluation process in which the CSAB will reevaluate the journal, and either it will stay in Scopus or it will be removed. I'll show you how that works. So if you think that there's about 24,000 journals in Scopus, And the first way that we say flag journals that go into the reevaluation process is based on observation and feedback. So, for example, if I'm visiting a university and the library or someone else says, hey, you know, I saw this journal that's in Scopus and we have strong reason to believe that it's a predatory journal, you know, that you can tell us that, give us the evidence, and we will flag it. It will go into the reevaluation process. But obviously, it's not something to be said as just an opinion. You need to have strong reasons and be able to back up the claim. We're also identifying journals which are underperforming by using benchmarks. So we can look at citations and usage of documents in Scopus, and certain journals which are relatively, you know, very low compared to averages. They will be flagged for reevaluation based on performance alone. Thirdly, we're identifying outliers. So there's a tool that will identify strange behavior in journals, such as citation behavior, which is unnatural. For example, citation networks. All of the citations come from the same 3 people and they happen to be related to the editor, or you know, massive increases in journal articles over a very short period of time. So all journals which are showing this kind of outlier, strange behavior, are also flagged. So based on these 3 ways, we flag the journals and they go into that reevaluation process. An example of a journal that showed some outlier behavior. So this journal had been accepted into Scopus in 2014. So at the time they were publishing like 7 and then they went to 41 papers in a year, which is just fine. But then from 2015 they went up to almost 800 papers by 2017, and this was seen as reason to flag the journal for reevaluation because it's a huge increase in output, right? I mean, it's not even, it's like 20 times as much output over a very short period. So it's something that needed to be looked into. So the point is, when you come to Scopus, whether you're doing research, whether you're doing analyses, whether you're a research manager that's setting KPOs, you're doing it based on a curated data set. All the content has been selected by independent board. It's monitored and reevaluated over time so that journals which don't need the mark are removed. In the period between 2016 to 2019, we reevaluated almost 800 journals. So the 3 ways which we flagged them, you can see 367 was based on publication concerns, 3 something was based on underperformance, and 68 based on outlier performance. And in total, we discontinued I think more than half. So 65% of the ones identified through publication concerns, 51% of the ones identified by underperformance, and 62% of the ones from outlier performance. So not all the journals which are flagged as potentially problematic, not all of them are removed. A lot of them are. Some of them aren't, right? So just because someone says something is not good enough or is predatory, it doesn't mean that we can take it on face value. It has to go into process and be evaluated by the independent board. And when they do that process, they use the same criteria that we covered earlier in the presentation. So it's the same criteria. I get the white screen of death again. Sorry. Oh, there. So for more information, we're going to provide these slides, and you can go and see the overview of all of the content that's in Scopus. So if you go to the source list here, you will be able to see all of the journals that are in Scopus, where we flagged red which ones are discontinued. And there's also a separate list of all of the journals which have been discontinued in Scopus. So for researchers who have a KPI to publish in Scopus index journals, you want to keep an eye on these journals so that you don't accidentally publish in a journal which has been discontinued. That would be a very painful, difficult thing to experience. I think generally, if you're going to focus on quartile 4 journals, be aware that some of them might be going through an reevaluation process. You won't know the outcome until it shows up in a discontinued list. So it's something to keep in mind. If you're aiming low, you always run the risk of that the journal status might change over time. So it might be worth it to aim a little bit higher, because the higher tiered journals are not going anywhere, basically. More information are available at these links. So there's an article with more information, as well as a link to a webinar which is specifically about reevaluation by our Director of Content, Wim Meester, and our CSAB Chair, Peter Brimblecombe. So if you're interested in that, you can link through to it from those links. But that was pretty much it. I think we covered it in 40 minutes, which leaves 20 minutes for questions.
Thanks, Sandra. So there are a couple of questions. Okay, first question, just go through. Okay, first and foremost, right, there are a lot of questions asking whether or not this webinar will be made available and the decks being shared. Yes, it will be made available. So for those of you who have registered using only your institutional email addresses, only they will be entertained. Yeah. So we do not accept any, I repeat now, we do not accept any Gmail or Yahoo or Hotmail or any other such accounts, except your schools or institutional email addresses or corporate email addresses. Okay. So once you send it to us, once you register, give us your institutional email addresses, and we will then send you the deck as well as the recording. Next question. Okay, first question, Sandra. What does it mean when you say focus on roots? Okay, so let me just start off by saying that I think this is under one of the criteria that you're referring to. So when you talk about the roots itself, it's basically based on your subject discipline. So for example, if you are looking at environmental science, you don't talk about material science within that journal itself. So bear in mind, this is at a journal level. Yeah, we're talking the journal level. Okay, that's a short answer. Sandra, you want to add on to it?
I think the roots was, I think, in the slide where you talked about generally what type of content that Scopus is looking for. I've also questioned, like, what does it mean that the research come from the roots of, I think you're right, the roots of what is important to a particular discipline or field can differ. But I think ultimately it means they're looking for content that has a contribution to the field, and often that's linked to what the kind of root or key questions or scope of the field is itself. So it's a kind of general and vague answer. I think the specific answer really depends on the particular field that you would look at.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, what you just mentioned, Sandra, what's very important from a journal perspective is always the aims and scope. So if a particular journal sets out its aims and scope up front, and then 2 years, 3 years down the line, it sort of detracts from that specified aims and scope, it is not really meeting its roots in that sense of the word. Okay. Next question. How do we prove that our journal already have peer review on stage 1? Okay. So normally a journal, again, everything goes back to its aims and scope. Yeah. So normally a journal will specify. Okay. That's why the homepage is very important. Up there, they actually specify all the details and how that particular journal will go through its own set of stringent criteria of accepting a particular article. So they could have it single blind or double blind, okay, before they actually accept such things. So the journal will have to decide We don't impose on that. And based on what the journal decides, we will then evaluate based on what the journal has specified to us what they set out to do. Okay, Sandra, you want to add on anything?
I think if they're wondering how do we know how you do the peer review, it really depends on you demonstrating the process in the website. And I think the more transparent it is, the more believable that it is. So I think some journals, we see that they indicate this is how we do the peer review process. It's double blind. This is exactly how we do it. So this is how we find the reviewer. This is how we make sure that the reviewer doesn't know who wrote the article and vice versa. Also, I mean, some journals put on the actual articles, the date of submission, date of review, so that the whole thing is very transparent, and that does give a certain trust when that detail is there. While some other journals say, well, we're peer reviewed, but then you look through the content and you wouldn't know how that peer review works, and you don't really see any details about it. And in that case, it might be less believable. So I think the more transparent it is and the more detail that's provided generally leaves an impression of, hey, this seems to be not just saying that they're doing it, but they really seem to be doing it as well. That was my comment. Sorry, long answer.
Thanks, Sander. Okay, next question. If a Scopus index journal is not open source, can I put the pre-published version on my author's page? That's the question.
If they mean, can you put preprints in? So all of the content at the moment that's in Scopus is peer reviewed. So it has to have made it through the peer review and be the final publication in the journal. At this point, it would not make sense to put a preprint published in the journal. It really has to make it through the peer review. That said, preprints are something that are an interesting thing. So you have a lot of servers which are hosting preprints, and that's valuable content, but it should always be identified as a separate type of content, right? A preprint is something that could be interesting in a situation like COVID-19 where you need to read stuff quickly. So you might want to read stuff before it makes it through peer review. But as a peer-reviewed journal being accepted into Scopus, what you will, the content which you upload and will be presented in Scopus is the post peer-reviewed final version.
Thanks, Enda. Hang on, yeah. I'm just going through because there are like loads of, most of them are comments rather than they're asking for the.
They're saying that I don't talk loud enough, or.
Well, that too, yeah. So, okay, another question. One of our journals in the university publishes articles in 3 languages: English, Divehi, which is our native language, and Arabic. Is there any issue for the journal to get indexed in Scopus if articles in 3 languages are used? Good question. You want to take the question, or you want me to answer?
You answer. I don't know. I don't know of any journals. I've not seen journals that have multiple languages. Like I know that I've seen journals in a lot of different languages, but I've not seen one journal that's in multiple languages. So if you know the answer, please.
Okay. So the general rule is that for Scopus itself, as long the abstracts, that's the beauty of Scopus, yeah. As long as the abstract is in English, the journal itself can be in any local language. That's the beauty of it. However, as what Sander mentioned, we've come across many journals that are in their native language. For example, in Thai, in Korea, and all that. But very seldom do we come across a journal that has multiple languages in there. And the reason being that, for example, if it's in your local language and if it's of science that's of relevance to the wider scientific community, how do the rest of the world understand or collaborate with the writer, the researcher of that particular article within that particular journal, if it's in multiple languages that are not very common? That's why we have a one agreed scientific language, which is English. So as far as possible, right, trying to have them in one I'm not saying we cannot have them in multiple languages, but so far, from our experience, we haven't come across journal that has multiple languages in them. Okay, so normally the journal editor would then, journal editor or the journal editors with his board of editors would then suggest to its researchers to submit articles that are in a particular language, in one language, or in English, better still. Yeah.
Okay, Derek, I think I want to ask a question myself,
Sure.
and I'm going to use a poll to do that. So the question to the audience is, how often do you use Scopus? We're curious.
There were several questions online asking, how do I enter a poll? So right now, Sender has posted a poll. So what you do is just click on your answer. That's it.
All right, I'm gonna, 35% of the people have voted, so let's give it another minute. And
Yeah.
while they're voting, maybe you can look at another question.
Okay. Yeah. So next question. This has 3 parts to this question. So first one, are all Science Direct Elsevier journals indexed in Scopus? Okay, that's the first question. Second one, kindly give us a list of free Scopus index journals. And the third one, how is Scopus supporting African journals?
Okay.
Yeah.
You want to go for the first one?
Okay, first one, I repeat the question again. Are all Science Direct Elsevier journals indexed in Scopus? Okay, so in Scopus itself, we index over 5,000 articles from 5,000 over publishers. All right. So is Elsevier inside? Yes, Elsevier journals are indexed in Scopus, majority of it. But Elsevier only constitutes about 11% of the entire Scopus database, right? Sandra, you want to add on to that?
I think most of the Science Direct, most of the journals in Science Direct are in Scopus because the Elsevier journals tend to be, you know, high quality ones, but they do have to go through the same process, right? So if there were a Elsevier journal that doesn't meet the criteria, that they don't get a free pass. It's the same for all the big publishers, actually. But they're less likely to not pass because they have high standards and built a brand that attracts some of the top authors to publish there, and strong editorial teams. So it's less of an issue, but it's still, yeah, they have to make the criteria.
Yeah.
I'm going to show the
please.
Results of the poll before I forget.
Yeah.
Share results. So, all right. So there we see 5% of you said you never use Scopus. So, like, why? If you want to share why, go ahead in the chat. But welcome anyway. If you want to start using Scopus and need help, let us know. 39% said sometimes, but not often. So I guess that means people occasionally use it. I'd be interested to know who those people are as well. 34 people, 18% said monthly, but not weekly. 57 people, 30% said weekly, but not daily. And 8%, 16 people said every day. So yeah, we love you. Keep coming back. But some of you who are not using it much, if there's any issues or reasons, you know, things blocking you from using it, let us know. We're happy to provide support or trainings or whatever it is. But I understand for some people it just makes sense. You know, you don't have to use a tool every day. Certainly administrators, and as a researcher, I didn't use databases every day. It was something I did occasionally. We have how much longer? We have about 10 more minutes.
Yeah. Okay. So we've got several more questions. So just now, the second part of the question, kindly give us a list of free Scopus index journals.
Free. Well, let me see if I can
go to live.
Yeah. So can you see my screen, Derek?
I can see you in the video. I
can't
see your
screen. You can only see it. No, all right. So that means I'm doing something wrong.
Okay. Meanwhile, okay, go for it.
Yeah. Okay. So a couple things. if you want to see all the journals in Scopus, you can go to Sources. And here there's a button to display only open access journals. So if I click this button and apply, I'm going to see 5,575 journals, which are open access journals. And if you wanted to look in a particular subject area, like let's say chemistry, you can use that filter. So this is all open access content. So if you were to link through to the journal and to the content in the journal, oops. Then it's open access, so you could do your analysis and identify which papers you want to look at in Scopus, and then when you want to read the full text, you can link to the publisher, and it will be like here it's Nature, but it's an open access paper, so you'd be able to download the PDF or otherwise read the whole paper just at the publisher. Okay, what were the other questions?
The third question was the third part of that particular question from the gentleman was, how is Scopus supporting African journals?
Well, I don't cover Africa, so I'm not sure, but I know that we in a lot of regions work with local citation indexes to basically help all of the journal editors there understand how they should prepare their journal and submit it to Scopus. So I assume that my team, our team that's based in that region would be doing some similar variant of that, but I don't know the details. So if it's something that's important to you, please email us. I can put you in touch with the representative that's active in that region.
Okay, next question was, is there any cost for a journal to join Scopus? There is no cost, okay?
Nope, it's free.
Yeah, it's free. So
just have to make the, you know, the work is really, the investment is to make the quality. So that's not easy, right? It's often a labor of love. We meet many editorial teams who put so much of their free time and, you know, they're sometimes not well funded and have to put in a lot of their own effort over many years to get it to the level where they can be indexed by these international indexes like Scopus. So that's really the investment. Once you have the quality, it doesn't cost any money. You don't have to pay Scopus anything. It's free.
Yeah, it's free. So bottom line is, look at the journal selection criteria, right? Look at all the FAQs and the links that were given. They actually will tell you and point to you what you need to do if you are a journal editor, or what you need to do to submit or suggest your title into Scopus, and it's free. Okay. Next question is, if a journal decides to decrease the number of issues from 12 issues to 6 issues per year, is this fine? I mean, does Scopus reevaluate that journal?
So if they're already in Scopus and they change from 12 to 6, would it be reevaluated? I'm not sure if in every case it would be. But it's a big change, so it might be flagged. Yeah. Yeah.
So typically it will be flagged because we have the system, this radar system that highlights certain journals that have a sudden reduction in the number of articles. However, if let's say moving forward, if the journal editor can specify very clearly why, and give a very good explanation why, and the board accepts that rationale, then perhaps, you know, it will still remain. If not, they'll be flagged and they'll be notified. Yeah. Next, please explain double blind. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think this. What we're trying to do here is answer questions, right, that's more pertaining to the subject matter on hand. So single blind, double blind, peer reviewed, all this stuff, it needs to be done on a separate level. So let me.
I can explain. I can explain.
Wow.
So like a peer review, when a journal reviews papers which are submitted to the journal, single blind means that the person submitting the paper doesn't know the name of the reviewer, or is it the other way around? Double blind means they both don't know each other's names, right? So the reviewer wouldn't know who's submitting the paper, but the person who submitted the paper wouldn't know who's reviewing the paper. And that's difficult to do because it means you have to remove, when the paper goes to the reviewer, the journal has to remove the name of the person, but also any hint of who they are, which is quite difficult to do because you can see through citations or different things, sometimes who the person is.
Okay, wait. Okay, so I want to answer this question. Like, for example, someone sent in, how do you compare between the content quality of Scopus database with other databases such as Web of Science? Okay. So, I mean, bottom line is this subject matter today is based on Scopus, right? So, however, there is another database out there, international database called Web of Science. And if you look at it right now, Scopus is the world's largest abstract and citation database, whereas Web of Science is the nearest competitor, for want of a better word, right? And most if not all of their subject matter are actually indexed in Scopus, are covered in Scopus itself. Do you have a slide, Sander, that
No, I mean, I think we just explained verbally that.
Yeah.
So Scopus has about 24,000 journals. Web of Science, if we look at their core collection, is roughly 12 or 13,000, and 99% of those 12 or 13,000 journals are also in Scopus. I can't speak to how they select their content, and I've been working for Elsevier for a long time, so we're focused on how we do it. We try to be transparent, and we try to find a sweet spot between comprehensiveness and top quality, while also having the reevaluation process in place to remove anything that is problematic. How do they compare? They're different things, but I tend not to want to comment on a database that I don't know as well, and focus on what we, how we do it at Scopus.
Okay. Another question that came out was, why most of the journals covered are from science disciplines? The social sciences journal likely are left behind.
Well, let's explore that. So if we look in here, if we going to look at our sources, and we're going to look at social sciences. So that would be quite far down. Social sciences, right? See, there are 7,000, almost 8,000 social science related journals in Scopus. So, I mean, to think that there's not much content there, I think is a misunderstanding. We've also added so many books in the last few years, hundreds of thousands of books and book series, which are very focused on social sciences, arts, and humanities. So I would say have a look here, use the subject area filter, and you can look within each subject also at a discipline level. And when you use the filter, you can see all the titles that are related to that discipline. But it's understood. There typically is more hard science than social science and arts and humanities. But since there's so much content, if you look at the absolute number of journals that are related to and books that are related to social sciences, it often isn't quite as low as people think it is. Yeah, that's the end of my answer. Sorry.
Okay. Thanks, Sander. Okay.
One more minute.
Yeah, one more minute. Yeah. So basically, those are the main questions. We hope you enjoyed today's session. Yeah.
Yeah, so everyone, thanks for joining us. We hope that you're well. I hope it was helpful. These webinars, we tend to focus on specific topics. The topic in 2 weeks will be about author profiles. What are they? How can you use them? And how can you modify your author profile in Scopus if you need to do that? So if that interests you, we'll see you in 2 weeks. To everyone in Indonesia and Malaysia, I think Monday is Hari Raya. Happy,
Monday is Hari Raya.
yeah. So enjoy, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Yep.
Take care.
Eid Mubarak to everyone celebrating it. Bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye.